guys, my name is Leticia and I am your Human Anatomy Lab instructor for this semester. I hope you guys are doing really well. This is going to be a very informal review of the anatomical models of the appendicular skeleton. So yeah, let's do it. I hope you had the opportunity of watching the whole video for the PowerPoints, because that means that you are already somewhat familiar with the structures that we will talk about today. So first of all, we talk about the axial skeleton last class, which was composed by your skull, that you cannot see really well here, your vertebral column, your sacrum, your sternum, and then your rib cage. So today we'll talk about everything else. So that includes your upper arms, your upper limbs, your lower limbs, your pelvic girdle, and then your shoulder or pectoral girdle. So starting with the pectoral girdle, here we know and we see how the pectoral girdle is formed by two bones. The first one is the clavicle, and then the second one is the scapula. So you probably cannot see from there. Let's get a little bit closer. It's going to be shaky, but at least you guys can see it. So here we have the clavicle, which you can see how it attaches to the scapula and stays horizontally towards the superior portion of your thorax, and you can see how the clavicle attaches medially to your sternum, correct, and also attaches laterally to your scapula. So in the same way, now if we think about the scapula, then you can see how the scapula attaches to the clavicle and also to your humerus, which is the first bone of your upper limbs. And fun fact, the scapula does not attach to any bones in the trunk. It's only attached by muscle, so that's why we have so much flexibility within moving our upper limbs. So now let's talk about the scapula individually. Okay, so here you have the scapula. The first thing you should figure out what is anterior, what's posterior. So here we know that this is anterior because it's a flat surface. This is posterior because we can see the spine. The second question is to figure out what's medial and what's lateral. Well, we have three borders. The first one, the longest one, is called the medial or vertebral border. This one, the lateral, it's called the axillary or lateral border, and that's the thickest. And then we have the superior border, which is the shortest, that stays towards the superior portion of the scapula. One thing that can help you to remember too is looking at this structure right here. So here we have a glenoid fossa, which is where your humerus is going to be attaching to. So extremely important. So if you know that your humerus, your arm, is going to be attaching to this area, you know that this side is going to be what? Lateral. So can you figure it out if this is the left or the right scapula? Well, this is a posterior view, and this is lateral, and this is medial. So we know that this is going to be the right scapula. So the next thing for us to look at is the angle. So we have a superior angle towards the top, inferior angle towards the bottom. After that, we have fossas. So we have the spine, which divides two fossas, looking from a posterior view. The first one is the supraspinous fossa. Second one, infraspinous fossa. Supra, the top, so towards the top of the spine, supraspinous. Infra, towards the bottom of the spine, infraspinous. If we turn towards the anterior portion, then you can see the subscapular fossa right here and how flat it looks like. Then we have two processes to talk about. So looking from the posterior view, if you continue to move from the spine towards the top, towards the highest point of the shoulder, you can see the acromion process. And that's where we're going to have the clavicle attaching to the scapula. So let's look at it at the model if we can very quick. I don't want to move too much, but so that is, so that is it. So do you see here the acromion process of the scapula is going to be connecting to the clavicle. So moving back, this is being a challenge, guys. So now we have the acromion process, which is going to be towards the front. So here we have the acromion process right here, which serves as a place for muscle attachment. And then if we look at a anterior or posterior view, you can see the scapular notch, which is this notch here, where we will have a lot of nerves passing through to innervate the muscles that attach to the scapula. So then if you look from a lateral view, you can see the glenoid fossa in two tubercles, small raised projections. The first one is called the greater tubercle right here, and the second one, oh no, that's not a greater tubercle. This is the supraglenoid tubercle. I apologize. So supraglenoid tubercle because it's going to be towards the top of the glenoid fossa, and then the infraglenoid tubercle because it's going to be towards the bottom of the glenoid fossa. So that is it for the scapula. So now let's talk about the clavicle. So here we have the clavicle. And the clavicle has two ends, just like we talked about in the beginning of this video. So one end is the sternum end. We call it sternal end because it attaches to the sternum, so that's going to be medial. And the other end is called the acromion end because it attaches to the acromion process of the scapula. So the sternum end is going to be more bulky, as you can see here, more bulky. And then the acromion end is going to be more like a spoon shape, if you can see. So in addition to that, we also have the conoid tubercle, and that's going to be towards the side of the acromion end. So here we have the conoid tubercle, which always points up. So that's how the clavicle will look like. So the sternal end, we have the acromion end, and then you have the conoid tubercle towards the top. So now we can talk about the humerus. So the humerus is the first bone of your upper limbs, and the first thing to figure is what is anterior and what's posterior. So we know that this is going to be anterior because you can see the condyles towards the distal portion of the humerus. Do you see the condyles here? The round articular areas. And then if you look at posteriorly, then you don't see the condyles as well, and you see this large fossa that is called the olecranon fossa. So that's how we know. So then, figuring out what's medial and what's lateral, we can see the head of the humerus. So the head of the humerus, the head of any bone, honestly, always points inwards. So we know that this area is going to be medial, and then this area is going to be lateral. So now we can talk about the structures. So we have the head here, we have the anatomical neck right around the head, then we have the surgical neck, which is going to be around this area. Then we have the greater tubercle here, then we have the lesser, the greater tubercle here, the lesser tubercle here, and then the bicipital groove in between the tubercles. So again, greater tubercle, lesser tubercle, bicipital groove, anatomical neck, head, and then the surgical neck. So then if you continue to move down, we have something called the deltoid tuberosity. So the deltoid tuberosity is different from the tubercles because it's a large, rounded projection. So you see how it kind of makes a little curve here. You cannot see super well, but you see a little curve. Then if you move towards more posteriorly, then you can see the radial groove a little bit better. So that's the radial groove here. So don't stress about it. If you know where the gluteal tuberosity is, just continue, the deltoid tuberosity, just continue to move towards the bottom and the posterior portion, and then you're going to find the radial groove. So what else do we need to talk about? I'll take a look at the manual very quick because sometimes I forget structures. Oh yes. Okay, so we talked about everything that was proximal. Now we can talk about everything that is distal. Now the manual doesn't stay. Okay, I'm going to put it here. So now we can talk about everything that is distal. So here we talked about how the condyles are always distal. So the condyles are special with the humerus because they have special names. So this one is called trochlea, and this one is called the capitulum. So the trochlea, it's going to be more square-shaped, and it's going to be medial, and then the capitulum is going to be lateral and more rounded. Always on the top of the condyles, we have epicondyles, which means above condyles. We have the medial and the lateral. And then we have the supracondylar ridges at both medial and lateral sides as well, which they are going to be the walls here. So then we have the fossa. So here we have the radial fossa and then the coronoid fossa. So the coronoid fossa is more medial. The radial fossa is lateral because we know that the radius, it's always going to be lateral. So everything that is radius, always lateral. So then we talked a little bit about the olecranon fossa, which is going to be posterior. And that is it. So now we can talk about the ulna and the radius. So here we have the ulna and the radius. So first things first is knowing that this U shape of the ulna is going to be anterior, and that's it. And then knowing what's medial and what's lateral, then you look at this talar process right here. So this talar process is going to be the sharp area here towards the sides. So both ulna and radius have this talar process. And you can even feel in your wrist, always towards the sides. Oops, towards the sides. So again, this is going to be the ulna, this is going to be the radius. You know that this is the radius because you can see the head and how flat it looks like. So let's talk a little bit more about the ulna. So here we have the ulnar head, which is interesting because it's going to be towards the bottom of the ulna. And then we have this talar process here, and then talar process here as well. So then let's start from the top and talk about this U shape here. So the name of the top of the U shape is called olecranon process. So we talk about the olecranon fossa in the humerus, correct? So they're going to be attaching to each other. Then you have the semilunar or trochlear knot, which is this U shape here. And then you have the coronoid process, which is going to be attaching to, yes, the coronoid fossa. Yes. So the names have a reason, correct? So then we have something called the radial notch right here. Oh, right here, which is where the head of the radius is going to be attaching to the ulna. So right here in between. We don't see it because they're connected, so I cannot take it off. But it's going to be right in this area. So then the next thing that we have is the interosseous border. So both ulna and radius have it. So it's going to be towards the inside here because the interosseous membrane is going to be the cartilage in between both bones. And then we just talked about this talar process, so we're good to go. So now we can talk about the radius, which has this flat head. So this is the head. We have the neck of the radius as well. This area right here is called the radial tuberosity. So you can see really well how it is a large rounded projection. And then you have, if you continue to go down, you have this talar process of the radius and also the ulnar notch where the head of the ulna is going to be attaching to. So that is it for, oh yeah, now we're talking about the wrist. So I already have the model here. So here, whenever you're looking at the wrist, let's talk about all of those bones. So here we have the bones of the wrist, which are called the carpal bones. We also have the metacarpal bones, which are the bones of the palm of your hand. And then you have your phalanges, which are the bones of your fingers. So we're starting with your wrist. First thing I need to figure it out is, well, how can we start naming it, right? So we talk in class that we have the little mnemonics for you to remember. Sally left the party to take Cathy home, correct? So remember that you always is starting from the lateral side. So what is lateral? Well, your radius is lateral. So if you look at it, you know that the radius is going to be the one without the U. So this is the radius, right? You continue to go down. The distal portion of the radius is actually larger than the ulna. So that can help you. And then we also have the thumb here. So how do we know that is the thumb, by the way? So we know that this is the thumb because it has less bones, right? So 1, 2, 3. And then the other fingers have 1, 2, 3, 4. So the thumb always has one less bone. So we're starting from the lateral side and we're counting towards the medial. And when we finish, then we go back to lateral and then we go medial again. So let's do it together. So first of all, this big bone that you see here is called the scaphoid. So the secret whenever you're naming those bones is knowing how to how to locate, but also knowing how to position the hand so we know how to find it. So the hand's going to be like this. That's how we know. So here we have, first of all, we have the scaphoid bone, then you have the lunate bone, and then you have the trichotrum, and then the pisiform. So the trichotrum is going to be on the bottom of the pisiform, as you can see here. Then we go back and we start again, and then we have the trapezium, the trapezoid, then we have the capitate, which is the largest one, and then the hamate. So let's do it again. So it's scaphoid, lunate, trichotrum, pisiform, trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate. That is it. And the hamate has those little hook-like. So now we can talk about the metatarsals. So metacarpals, sorry. So the metacarpals, they are named, actually number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So everything always starts from the thumb, always starts laterally. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We also divide them into 3 structures, which are the head, the body, and the base. So the base is going to be more proximal, and the head is going to be more distal. And that is it. So now we can move on and we can talk about the phalanges, right? So thinking about the phalanges, we talked about how the thumb honestly has only 2. So we have 1 phalange, 2 phalanges. So since we only have 2, it's going to be the proximal phalange and then the distal phalange. But the other fingers, we have 1, 2, 3. So we call them proximal phalange, intermediate phalange, and then distal phalange. So same thing, proximal because it's going to be closer to the point of attachment of the body, and then distal because it's going to be further away, correct? So let's do it again. So all of those are going to be proximal, and all of those are going to be distal, and then the ones in the middle are going to be intermediate. So the thumb does not have the intermediate. So now we can talk about the joints. So thinking about the joints. So if you know the name of the bones, then you can name the joints really well. So the name of the joint between the carpal bones and the metacarpal bones is going to be carpal-metacarpal joint. So the place of connection between those bones. Then, I don't even think that this is on your manual, so let's move on. So then you have the metacarpal bones and then the phalanges. So that's going to be metacarpal phalangeal joint. And then you have in between phalanges, which is going to be interphalangeal joint. So all of those are interphalangeal. The difference is that since we have 3 bones and then 2 joints, then we call them proximal interphalangeal joint and distal interphalangeal joint. And then here we only have the interphalangeal joint because we just have 1. So that is it for your upper limbs.